All right, I think it's go time. All right, first of all, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Dave Brewer, so this is a panel on the government and integrating with AI, right? We'll get to that in a minute. But we're just going to go down the line and introduce ourselves really quick with Jaime, and we'll go from there.
Good afternoon, everybody. Jaime, Gracia, Director of Strategic Enterprise Programs at the U.S. Department of State. I work many portfolio items across the department, which includes putting an overlay of AI and machine learning over our procurement operations. So I'm focused on procurement, so that's kind of my lens. I also work category management and strategic sourcing initiatives across the department, in addition to being the innovation advocate and industry liaison to AEP. So that's the portfolio of my work.
Right. Yeah, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Dave Brewer. I go by Brewer, keep it informal. I work for Headquarters Air Force with 857 and Air Force Futures. We do integrative solutions and disruptive technology. I'm also part of the Kelly Johnson Innovation Center out of the Michigan Air National Guard. And lastly, I assist with the Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office, writing DoD AI strategy.
Hey, I'm Wilfred Justin. I'm from Web Services, and I lead the modernization team for worldwide public sector partners. So what it means is we work with both technology companies and consulting companies, both big and nimble, and we help them to build cognitive systems and solutions based on deep learning so that the agencies can provide better and secure services to the citizens of this country.
My name is Scott Beliveau. I work at the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Basically, we issue all kind of patents and trademarks for all the nice things around you. My role there, within there, is sort of all things data. I work with both our public dissemination activities as well as our internal advanced analytics, as well as in addition to our artificial intelligence programs.
Right on. So thank you, panelists. I'm honored to be up here with all of you guys. We're going to start off with Jaime really quick with a quick question on AI as it's beginning to be integrated with the public sector. As we start to look at things with the security and defense and how the infrastructure improvements are taking place, can you tell me where you see the impact of AI is going in the future? Springboard off of currently what we're saying.
Yeah, I mean, AI is just really starting to take hold, and I always joke that there's certain categories of what AI does. It's to hunt bad guys, detect fraud, and where's my stuff. Those are the kind of the three categories that I talk about with artificial intelligence. But certainly for my focus, not only procurement but Department of State, we're looking to really integrate AI for our diplomats and our national security interests for our diplomacy worldwide. So that's really our focus at the Department of State, is how we use AI for those platforms. For me personally, what I look for in procurement is finding ways to extract value out of our procurement data to make better contracts, better requirements, better opportunities for engagement, and not so much to save money, which of course is what we want to do, but extract value and increase engagement with our supplier base. So there's a whole slew of different areas of data that the government is using, but certainly as a veteran myself and as a lieutenant colonel here who uses these services, certainly I'm very passionate about what the Department of Veterans Affairs is doing with their AI Center, which is really focused on things such as homelessness and preventing suicide. So there's quite a bit of potential certainly there. CDC is doing incredible things with healthcare. I mean, we're technically still in COVID, right? So there's a lot of data there to try to help mitigate those issues. Emergency services with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, right, using AI to help displaced people to find services as well. So I can go on and on and on, but the sky is really the limit on how AI is affecting government management and really transforming government operations.
Yeah, that's interesting. And Scott, I'd like to kick it over to you as well and see how AI is being adopted and accepted within your department.
Sure, and to kind of add on to what you were saying earlier was, in our kind of, USPTO is a little weird in the federal government in that we're fully user fee funded. So we don't take any, the fees that we collect ultimately get appropriated back, but as a result, we tend to operate a little more commercial entity or business in the sense that we set our own fees, we collect our own fees and manage them. Well, what does that mean? So a lot of our AI efforts are really driving toward operational improvement efficiency such that we're not in kind of a situation of potentially raising fees, number one. And number two, the faster that we're able to produce a high quality product, the sooner inventors and garages and likewise can get access to capital to then market those particular ideas and services. So a lot of our AI is generated in looking at direct operational impact improvement to employees.
Yeah, and that's a great lead in, exactly. I'm coming in from the Department of Defense, and to kind of move the conversation along. What we're looking at is leveraging AI in government, right? And from the Department of Defense standpoint, it's not easy. We haven't done a great job of accepting the technology and figuring out a way to make it operationally imperative and how we integrate it into current military operations. If I can kind of just further on that, adoption is certainly a big deal. Adoption began with, we've got really not very coherent data. It's stovepiped, it's siloed, and as a result, the Department of Defense has a really hard time with opening up those silos to allow cross-pollination between data. Trust is a big deal. And from the Department of Defense standpoint, what I'm pushing from Air Force Futures and the Pentagon is human-machine teaming. I think that's the way to start to build the frog. I think once we start integrating the technology, in fact, I transcend saying AI and ML. I think senior leaders become enamored with those terms. As I do innovation, that's yet another term that they become enamored with. It doesn't really mean much to them. It's too nebulous. So I just stick with algorithms. So how do you use algorithms in a way that the military and the DoD can effectively employ them? Well, it begins really with accepting that humans and machines are not in competition, but they need to be augmenting each other. So the way to break into the DoD and use algorithms and start to employ AI and ML technologies is to allow machines to do what they do well, but process that data and offer it up to a human who then can operationalize that data.
The challenges in adoption?
Or it's a couple.
Okay. So I have a holistic view. We work with DoD civilian intelligence community, and we do see that different agencies are adopting AI, right? It's rigorous in nature. But I think the question is, what are the challenges? The government could rapidly adopt AI, but we see a number of challenges. And I'm just going to summarize three things, right? The number one challenge is data, right? Access to data. Data is the new code when it comes to artificial intelligence, but unfortunately, when it comes to the government agencies, data are still in silos. There is no governance of data. So it becomes a real challenge to access the data, build a data lake on top of which machine learning can be applied, right? That is one. The second challenge we constantly hear from customers as well as partners is that reaching the right talent, right? Skill gap. Because we're all competing against the same talent. Agencies, partners, Amazon, Google, everybody. So it is very hard to retain and hire data scientists and people with expert machine learning practitioners. Of course, I have a couple of ideas on that, but we can take it to the next forum. But the one important thing that I want to mention for folks here is oftentimes privacy and compliance. If you think about GDPR, it's awesome, right? I'm a big proponent of security and compliance. But most of the time, the stakeholders, they don't have a complete understanding of privacy and security and compliance. And they simply say that, hey, we cannot do machine learning or artificial intelligence because of privacy, because of compliance. But it is not, right? You can talk about DoD IL4, IL5, FedRAMP, and you can talk about ICAR compliance. You can talk and ask the providers how they are compliant and how they are implementing all those kinds of privacy laws. So those are the three challenges, and of course,
Yeah, and I think we can continue that. Having AWS up here is really important, I would say, probably from the department levels, at least from the DoD where I sit. What I'm curious is to build trust around AI and what your views are on that.
I'm going to take this.
Yeah. No.
That's the biggest, right? And that was a good segue because trust, right? So I'm not sure how many of you have artificial intelligence background. That is the beauty of artificial intelligence. It's a new programming paradigm, right? It's all about making and automating the ineffable. So what it means is you cannot look at lines of code and reverse engineer and understand the logic. So oftentimes, when you're building a machine learning model, it becomes a black box. And In day-to-day life, every single one of you are using those kind of services. When you're going on GPS, when you're watching a movie, when you're buying a product on Amazon, they use artificial intelligence to recommend you products, right? But we don't question that. But to the lieutenant's point here, when it comes to public sector and government, we are dealing with mission critical applications, right? If you're, for example, if you want to decommission a tank from the battlefield, or if you want to optimize a map of a drone, or if you want to completely control a fleet of unmanned autonomous vehicles, you better explain why the machine learning model is behaving in a certain way, right? So lack of trust and transparency is the biggest challenge when it comes to adoption. But to answer the question, there are a lot of solutions in place now, right? So when you're building a model, for example, from an database perspective or any other provider perspective, when you're building a model, there are two things you have to make sure, and you have to sell that value prop to the stakeholders and decision makers. When you're building the model, you have to make sure that the model doesn't have any kind of bias, cognitive bias or data bias. Second, when you're actually deploying the model in production, when it's actually inferencing, you're saying that, hey, drone, take 10,000 feet because the drone identified a tank, right? You should be able to clearly explain how that machine learning model made that decision. There are a lot of open source tools available which can do that. So you should be able to sell that value prop to earn the trust of the stakeholders that they can implement more solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Mark said in a previous discussion earlier, cybersecurity is also the deal with DoD, right? We're constantly, there's a lot of mistrust in algorithms as a result of cybersecurity concerns. And so the breach of that going into, and I would imagine the Department of State has similar concerns, is addressing, having both of those parties in the room, right? The engineers that are designing algorithms, the fitness functions that go with them. There's a big problem there with the DoD. They don't know how to define a fitness function, and so that's challenging in and of itself, but it creates those vulnerabilities, and therefore a lack of trust in the performance, but also the cybersecurity component of it, as it appears to be vulnerable. I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, just getting back to the trust issue, just fundamentally, I mean, just putting it in action. So I asked one of my vendors to provide me some data on how much we're spending with a certain vendor. And so far, I've had 3 answers as of this morning. So it just prevents us to really get down to where I want to be, which is the truth, right? That's what we're trying to do. And these are the kind of data challenges that we're working through, because ultimately what I'm trying to do, and what we're being really successful right now, is to build that data lake, right? That's the true source of data. And that's what we're doing, because like a lot of contract writing systems, a lot of contracting and procurement functions, not only in the public sector, in the private sector, it's very siloed. A lot of systems are not talking to one another. And so you get this huge spider web of components out there where you don't have that true source of data. So what I'm trying to do is really funnel all the data into a cloud-based data lake so that I can now go fishing in it. And I want that data lake deep, and I want it very functional so that I can really get some good value out of it. And those are the types of things that we're actively doing today to ensure that we have truth, but more importantly, trust. Because we just stood up the Center for Analysis globally, and they need to be providing mission-critical data that depends on people's lives. I mean, very life and death. So we can't afford to not have trust in the data. So these are the things that we're actively working with at the Department of State to ensure that we've got the truth and also getting the bias out of the data, which is very important to understand not only where it is, but to root it out. That's another big challenge that we have as well.
Absolutely. Scott, we're in the Patent and Trademark Office. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, it keeps coming back to the teamwork, this trust. I mean, we certainly don't have this, life or death scenario that's based on decisions. So I'd be really curious how to convince folks as to trust the machine. The machine says go left. Particularly in terms of the military culture, things like that, we don't have that within our agency. So the way we've started, we do have a data lake. Now we're talking, actually moving away from data lakes to lakehouse architectures to try to, gravitate more of that single source of truth or data asset between our warehouse structured data and our unstructured data, which tends to be our example work product. But where we found our spot of trust in the operational AI, because we do have an operational AI USPTO, in production that is how all of our employees get their work. Work comes in, it says, okay, this work should go to these people, and then the people use that information to then search the work. Well, the way we kind of did that in terms of building trust was, as you mentioned before, is the machine-human partnership. We have human in the loop as part of that whole chain wherein the examiners can challenge the decision of the machine. The machine highlights the factors that it used through a nice user interface and says, hey, these are the reasons why I came up with this particular decision. And examiners can challenge it, and we put in place a process by which, if the examiner disagrees with the machine, a human judge or referee comes in and then makes a decision one way or the other. The nice part of this whole system is, well, anytime you're dealing with trust or models, the piece that sometimes is challenging in government is the O&M. It's not always sexy doing the O&M. We're not good at keeping up with technical debt, I think, generally within the federal government. Within models now, we have model drift, feedback, and things like that we need to start taking into account. In our system of building that trust, the person is in the loop, we're getting their feedback that is directly training the model every single cycle for the next round, or the next decision-making process.
Yeah, and if I can keep you on the spot for just a minute longer, Scott, and we'll certainly go down the panel with this question, then how does your department define AI success or algorithmic success in your operations?
So for us, it kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier. We are a fee-funded organization, and it's about the efficiency of processing through for a particular fee rate. So the faster we can move things forward through the system, that defines our success. In our situation, in deploying this, in this particular use case model, we looked at, okay, what are manual activities that are going on? There was a huge contract associated with this work previously going on, which did not actually have a feedback loop, which was the other value add when we talk about adoption and things like that. And we tackled that and we said, hey, now we saved a ton of money. And for us as the agency, that was the biggest concern of, can we demonstrate particularly with our analytics and staying up late, hard dollar ROIs resulting from that effort. And that became sort of a hard to argue with, in budgetary discussions that go on. When you say, hey, look, we ended this contract and we saved a ton of money doing it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I mean, certainly different application of the same question of AI success. I mean, that's how we grow this. And have you kind of cracked it up on how you guys are defining it?
Yeah, I mean, right to that point is we're able to save money by not just cutting people out, but looking at cost, but from an opportunity cost standpoint, and really looking at value. Right? That's the paradigm shift that we're making. Procurement's a little bit different because I think it's a little bit more tangible. Because for us, really using AI is to go from low to high value work, which is part of the presidential management agenda. And that's what we want our contracting officers to be doing, not only at the Department of State, but across the government. Because being a contracting officer in the government is a very complex, difficult function. It takes years and years to train a CO, but to get a really good CO is like a diamond. And you want to give them all the tools so they can be efficient and really drive value for the mission. And AI is a great tool to do that, and that's what I'm doing as the Department of State, to put these tools in place so that I can take work off their hands, right? Procurement, not only in government, but commercial, was a lot of paper pushing, a lot of low value work, like I mentioned. So if I can have bots and I can have AI machine learning do all that for me, okay, so I just saved you 30 minutes per process, times dollar amount, times transactional volume. I mean, that's real, tangible ROI. And that's just on one process, right? Just one process that the Federal Acquisition Regulation says that I must do before I award a contract. And that's times 100 different processes that I can actually automate. So right now, we're just doing a deep dive analysis into what we need to automate so we can do it strategically. Because we talk about it, you had mentioned, different phrasing, right, to get more buy-in from stakeholders, right? The shiny object is what I want to get us out of. And that's what's happening right now in the market for machine learning and AI in particular. It's like, oh, let's implement this, let's implement that, let's implement this. But what are we getting out of that? What is the return, and how is that being done in a strategic manner? So those are the types of things that I'm doing on the back end to really set up a different structure and a strategic model for success. But before we even think about implementing AI, it's where is it going to go, what actions are going to perform, but more importantly, what outcomes are we going to do, right? What does success look like? And that's the decision that we're making, not only from a dollars and cents standpoint, but really impacting the workforce and making them a force multiplier so that they can go out and do their jobs much better and more efficient.
Yeah, and again, to be a little bit divergent, right? The DoD, we don't operate so much on the profit and loss sheet or the effectiveness of the efficiency of things, but to get to operations, and operations being very defined, specifically across the DoD and the different services from the Navy, the air component, of course, the Air Force, the sea, and now the space domain. So multi-domain operations is an interesting paradigm when you think about algorithmic warfare and the operationalization of AI and Enablement. So connecting these different silos having to do with stovepipe data, it's service dependent with each of the departments of the military. They don't share information very well. And so what it does is it slows things down, not to mention it complicated with classification levels, whether it's unclassified, secret, or top secret. And we've all seen on the news that that's been an emerging upfront news article coming up in the last week, right? And so the fitness function is not defined well in the DoD. They don't understand how to write a fitness function with an objective that applies to the strengths that the algorithm can provide. So there's frustrations from an innovation standpoint. I'm the program director for a program called Aim High, Academia, Industry, Military, Higher Innovations. And so we're pushing forward on different technologies, one of them being data and algorithmic warfare. And when we look at this, we see that the DoD can't wrap their arms around how to employ this at a tactical or operational level. And there's two ways to segregate that, right? You can segregate it out to being a support function or being a forefront of operations. And so there's certainly no trust for that at that point, right? You have aircraft pilots, fighter pilots, we've all seen the movies and Top Gun, they certainly don't want an algorithm doing their job for them, when in reality, the biggest limitation within the jet is the human. With that being said, on the ground, being able to attach what we see from the space domain into the cockpit, into the ground level, it's perplexing on how do you define that as success. Is it, again, from a support function where we just provide background data to help a human make a decision, or do we allow the algorithm to make the decision in and of itself, and then the human supporting that? We haven't gotten there yet. So again, that human-machine teaming is the key to success initially for the DoD, and then from building off of that, we'll see if there gets to a point where generationally we evolve from the old fighter pilots and the old commanders that are used to doing it all themselves, to trusting in technologies the younger generations move up and move into command positions.
So just something quickly, right? So how do we define success from an AWS perspective? We are uniquely positioned because we work with different agencies. For us, success means how effectively we are helping the agency to achieve the mission. So that is the beauty of AI, right? For some use cases, it might be increasing the productivity or saving cost. But the beauty of the technology like AI is certain things cannot be solved without technologies like AI. Like for example, you know, for the public sector, so artificial intelligence for good is so important, right? So that's how I define success. For example, we are helping deforestation, fighting deforestation using artificial intelligence. Fighting child trafficking, it cannot be done using any other way except using machine learning. So that it can scan through millions of ads and it can avoid or target ads which are targeting children for sex trafficking and inform the local police enforcement agencies. Or we are working with a couple of countries where we are protecting the endangered species in this matter, right? So that is success. Enabling the mission of the agency through artificial intelligence is how we define success.
Yeah, really good. And success, certainly, I would say at the department levels, I don't believe that we can do it individually. The talent pool isn't there. Certainly the pay structure isn't there. With that being said, the culture doesn't necessarily adapt to AI and algorithmic type technologies quite yet, although we say it in meetings. So really the strength of all this comes down to our collaborations and partnerships. And from the State Department's perspective, Jaime, I'd love to hear where you guys are approaching that with trusting those partnerships with industry and academic institutions where we can leverage the strengths coming out of there. So we at the department level can actually grow outside of ourselves.
Yeah, so one of my roles, as I mentioned, I'm the industry liaison for the department. So that's effectively an ombudsman, right, to the department, a matchmaker, a connector. The Department of State has a notorious history of being a black box in this area. Department of State licensed contractors, they have one for decades. Innovation doesn't really happen, it's a closed door. So I came in along with our new super procurement executives, Mike Darius, to really just completely change that paradigm effectively overnight and saying, there's new sheriffs in town, we will talk to people, and you will do this. It wasn't really a tough fight because everyone knows that they need to do this, but they don't do it anyway. So it's really baby steps for us, but we're moving forward very quickly and seeing a lot of great results. One of our biggest vehicles right now is called Evolve. That's a $10 billion vehicle that we're going to be putting out later next year. It's one of the big ticket in DC, if you will, for the Department of State. We wanted to change the paradigm immediately on how we were going to do this. So from the get-go, we put out draft documents. We're doing lots of exchanges with industry, right? Letting them ask questions about this particular topic, or just really getting like, hey, what do you mean by this? Or have you thought about this, right? Getting that thought leadership from industry is critical so that we can have successful outcomes, because the only way that we're going to be successful in completing the mission is having strategic partnerships with government. So that's what we're trying to do at the Department of State, is really change that shift from, we've got this contractor, we're going to keep them for 20 years, and then we're not going to innovate, to, what does success look like? Let's focus on outcomes, but let's really find different avenues for innovation. That's what I'm trying to do, by getting more in touch with universities and laboratories, and trying to do some of the things actually I was doing at the Department of Homeland Security, working with science and technology, which is, really find innovative firms like, oh, you guys, right? How do I get you in the door? Trying to do that, or if you don't have public sector work, right? How do I get you in the door right away? We were doing that in my last agency, Treasury, at IRS specifically, with just techniques, right, that we can do. So I'm implementing that at the Department of State because I want to be able to get innovation quickly, efficiently, and really change the paradigm of procurement for Agile. And I don't mean Agile development, which is Agile contracting, Agile procurement, right? There's a way to do it, right? We were awarded contracts, $100 million in 30 days. Right? That's not done normally. But we were doing it, and we can do it again, and that's kind of what we're going to do at the Department of State. But it really starts with good engagement and outreach first, right? And really getting that thought leadership inside the door so we can build probably the most important thing, which is that requirement, right? What are we trying to do? But I don't want to write a 100-page requirement document and then throw it out there and say, hey guys, what do you guys think about this? Right? I want to focus my customers on what outcomes they're trying to achieve, right? Focus on the mission, and then now go talk to industry about what is the challenge that we're trying to solve. That's a more effective way of building these partnerships for not only the short term, but the long term once the contract is actually done, so that we can build that partnership from the beginning. So these are all the tools and techniques and the infrastructure that I'm building today at the department.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Surprisingly, I've also used the term innovation to be able to further these partnerships as well. And excited to see that the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, accelerate, change, or lose, is his mantra, right? And so he's pushing for us to kind of go into the fringe elements and push outside of our own organizations to include partner DoD organizations as well as industry and academic partners, which is why I'm here in the first place. The reality is getting with FFRDCs and getting to some of the centers of excellence that aren't traditionally military, but then reaching out to industry partners that have no affiliation with the Department of Defense or the government in general has been a kind of a shining star for how we've begun to broach data, and we've got a long way to go. And certainly as we dip our toe in the water with AI and ML. The stand-up of the Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office, which is a DoD element directly supporting and reporting to the Secretary of Defense, I think was a huge step forward. It engulfed many other positions that allowed the Chief Technical Officer, the Chief Data Officer, as well as the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center. But out of all that, allows us to centralize our focus into industry partners that we have and leverage those, not with just the traditional big five contracting companies, and those are of course important, but to also reach out into small businesses. And what we've seen is that the vehicle of innovation has allowed for that to happen with small business innovation resources that go out, SIVers, STTRs, DoD, tech demos. There's a number of different vehicles where small vendors can go in, and I'll also name drop a couple of organizations that represent the DoD well, such as the Defense Innovation Unit, DIU, is huge in project management and including academic institutions, but more importantly, that's where they bring their industry partners to give them a shot at providing the brilliance that you guys have out in the field, present it to the DoD, and that's where we partner up on a very short-term basis to be able to move forward with our objectives and certainly help bring you guys into kind of the big leagues with how the DoD operates. And Scott, I'm looking for how you guys.
Well, I was going to piggyback on, if I look at organizationally as a government agency, what is the only thing I have that's a competitive advantage internally? I'm the only one with the PTO table. So a lot of my role has been touching on partnerships. How, looking at it from a VC model or a government version of the VC model, to the extent that we're able to do it, the better I can get the data out there, or my data out there, and get people who have interesting technologies that may not necessarily be directly tied or using my data, but those organizations or companies are looking at problems that I have or have solutions for problems I have. Can I spin in that technology by providing some form of incentive to take a look at our data, use our data and see if it's applicable to that problem, to bring it back in, bring it back into the agency? Because, you said it's very challenging, government rates and things like that, to build a strong, large-scale data science practice internally. But I know it's out there. There's lots of people, at this conference who are solving lots of cool problems. Some of them, can I take those problems and have them apply to my data sets to look at some of our internal challenges through some unique contracting?
That's what I'm here.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to get to a point where we can certainly take a few questions from you guys before we wrap up. But one of the last questions I'd like to put out there for Wilfred, certainly, is from an AWS standpoint. Where do you see innovation really being able to explode? Do you see the different departments as you support us and as you guys have programs? Do you see us being easy enough to work with that there's profitable growth? As we saw with the kickoff discussion for this conference, aerospace and defense was the smallest financial gain, at least currently seen to date. So there's certainly room for growth. But what's your take on
innovation?
Innovation growth that would include AI, ML,
yes. So in general, I'm going to talk about innovation that's going to happen in this function, right? In this way. So that's a super technical topic, so I'm just going to keep it at a high level. So we talk about the blockers when it comes to agencies and adoption and other things, but where the industry is going, right? So we have still, I believe that we have a long way to go. And I just cite a couple of things. The challenge, as Drew mentioned, is data silos. But we have been building machine learning models, we have been building machine learning models, and it has been a model-centric approach, meaning that we focus too much on hyperparameter optimization, optimizing the code so that the model can give better performance and accuracy. But where we are trending, the innovation is happening where we are trying to do a data-centric approach so that we can have quality data. This is where feature engineering comes into play. We apply statistical methods so that we can extract large amount of data, convert it into useful set of data. So instead of having large quantities of data, we can have quality data to build models which can provide better accuracy and performance. That is number one. Especially when it comes to BOD and IC, the innovation that is going to happen or happening is, it is because of the fact that it demands, a lot of use cases demand inference at the edge. Meaning that you might have powerful cloud servers and GPUs to process, right, build and train the model. And if you know about neural networks, they are pretty large in size, right? But when you're trying to deploy the model on the edge devices, those devices have a lot of constraints. They have memory constraints, CPU constraints, storage constraints. So innovation is happening so that you can really optimize the model, right? Like quantization and other things. And I think it will continue to happen in that space because we have to pretty much enable tons of use cases which will need inference at the edge. And the third point I want to make sure is it's all about, if you think about it, the goal of AI, I think in my opinion, is to achieve what is known as generalizable intelligence. Meaning that multimodal thinking, right? When you are speaking in a panel, we can have artificial intelligence service which can translate it to text, but that is not multimodal, right? You should be able to understand the body language that is happening between us, background, and the system should be able to understand, hey, what is happening, actually happening, right? That is multimodal training. To sum it up, that's where we are going, right? So, for example, if you think about your childhood, probably your mom told, hey, this is a dog and this is a cat, probably once, and you were able to distinguish between a dog and a cat, right? There is an artificial intelligence system, we can do it, but we haven't trained the model across millions of data points. So where we are trying to achieve the innovation is happening is, we want to continue to innovate using software, hardware, and everything so that we reach a state where we will be able to build cognitive systems and deep learning systems for different kind of agencies where they will be really smart with minimum number of inputs, right? We don't need to give a lot of inputs. And that's where we're going.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. And one of the points I'd like to bring up from a DoD standpoint, we certainly need our industry partners. And so my request to you guys would be, as you approach the DoD, start with the foundation on what are the problems categorically that the DoD is looking at in the individual services. Look at their strategy. Look and see what the senior leaders are actually worried about. Because what I've seen oftentimes is I get demos all the time from the Pentagon. I mean, it's all the time. And what I find is they're trying to bring a solution and then hunt for a problem. And quite frankly, it isn't successful. So if you can find strategically where there's a priority, and then if so be it, your innovation, your algorithm, your technology addresses that, scratches the itch, and that's when we can attack ferociously, and that's when there will be an effective contract vehicle that could be a short-term demo, proof of concept. We do a lot of different terms out there, which then eventually allows things to be exercised, and then really the main goal is to get into where you are an accepted program of record, and that's when kind of you land. And so as you approach those, don't just pitch the developmental costs of what your program is, because for the love of heaven, AI and algorithms, they'll need to be trained, right? And the government doesn't really holistically understand the totality of that. Anecdotal story, whenever we do an exercise, we always say two things, right? We're going to do a cyber attack on this adversary, and somehow that just magically takes place. I think my cyber professionals in here would agree that it isn't quite that easy to snap your fingers and just take down a specific component. And the other thing that we say is, oh, well, I don't know if we're going to be able to solve this, so we're going to do something with AI. There's no fitness function to that, right? And so we're just going to put these blanket statements over there. So please help understand that when you push a contract out, there is developmental costs. Yep, got to do it. But I need sustainment costs built into there. How we can grow it, how we can expand the access to the data, how that data can train the system up. And it should be a pitch that's iterative. Currently working on, again, another quick story since we have just about a minute. I'm working on an algorithm with a university, and it's with a predictive solar flare model. It's tremendous. Currently, as they test it, they're at 100% prediction rate. It sounds great, and all my kernels love that. I'm very uncomfortable with that, because they have to push it to the limit of the algorithm's capability. We need to train it, and we need to see where it actually does fall apart. So it's interesting. Please train, at least the DoD, I won't speak for your departments, help train my colonels and my generals on what a fitness function can actually provide and those sustainment costs to grow into what it needs to be. So unless there's any other party,
Also, make sure that you learn all the acronyms. Very important in the public sector.